love the Old West. From howdies to horses, from tarnations to tumbleweeds, to the giddy up and gunfire. I love the Wild West. Something about a simpler time when there was no modern technology overstimulating our senses. Yeah! Just southern folks, cow pokes, and a third thing, oaks. And with my love of the Old West comes my obligatory obsession with Red Dead Redemption. Arthur Morgan, John Marston, Dutch Vanderlyn, I want to kiss them all. And that is only something I can properly do in VR. Initially, this video was going to be on the VR games that make you feel the most like you're in Red Dead, but during my search and through playing what was available, I realized that this was all kind of futile. Looking through Steam and on Google, there are very few games that take place in this setting, fewer so with good reviews, and almost none that are anything more than just a simple series of arcade mini-games. This brings a tear to my eye, because the Wild West would be such a great environment for a really good, high-quality VR game. Before I get started, I wanted to say I got this video idea from Clasted Bleaks, who did a video on the Red Dead VR mod, so I highly recommend giving it a watch. It's a really good video. So, what would a Red Dead game in VR actually look like? Why is it literally the best idea ever, and why does it matter? Well, I will answer most of these questions. Let's get started. Before we can apply this to the Western setting, we gotta figure out exactly what makes a good VR game in the first place. Since just taking a PC or a console game and just slapping it on your face wouldn't work in this case. Well, personally, what I prefer about VR over PC games is you control the speed of everything. Instead of an animation team creating your reload animations, your eating animations, your crafting animations, you've got to do most of the work. The more you play a game and do the same menial task, you figure out better and better ways of speeding it up. Things like healing, reloading. Taking a look at the most popular and well-received VR games, we can see some of this. Games like Walking Dead, Saints and Sinners, and Half-Life Alyx shows this very well. It exemplifies what makes VR fun. Getting your little grubby, grimy mitts in the virtual world is kind of the whole point. One major issue that affects older and lower quality VR games is physics and collision. I am much more willing to play Blade and Sorcery and Boneworks than I am any game where my hand can kind of just sort of phase in and out of objects. It's just a new standard of immersion. To me, this means every good high-quality VR game goes out of its way to immerse the player. It has the core gameplay mechanic to focus on, then the supporting mechanics, and then even smaller details to sort of fill in the gaps. I'll use Half-Life Alyx as an example because that's kind of become the new standard for VR. The core gameplay of Half-Life Alyx is survival. The mechanics it uses to support this include combat, puzzles, and exploration. And the details it uses are things like great physics, interactive objects, and big set pieces. All things it technically doesn't need, but all things that keep me wanting to play more and more. Now, the last thing I think will be important is visual. As much as I like to think graphics aren't vital, I think it's significantly more important in VR in cases like this. You can get as up close and personal with the objects in VR as you want. And having a decent looking game graphically can be vital for keeping immersion. Obviously, there are some exceptions to these rules depending on the context, but overall, I find these rules to be important. Now, this leads me to the next portion. What? Filmmaking. I may be a YouTuber who talks about gaming, but I actually went to school for filmmaking, so I have some ground to stand on here. The classic Western environment typically consists of a gun-toting protagonist, a small town not big enough for the two of us, and some nasty target practice. Obviously, every Western environment isn't exactly the same, but we're going off of Red Dead, and these are the main ideals we should be chasing. For characters, I've noticed the most popular cowboys, both in games and in movies, seem to be the type who are extremely adept and skilled, but don't parade around that fact like your Duke Nukems of the world.
I'm not memorizing the multiplication table. I have a calculator, and my...
Think of Clint Eastwood. His whole thing was about being the mysterious stranger who steps into town and brings good old-fashioned iron justice. Next is the environment. One of the keys to the environment is the small towns with wooden buildings bustling with people on their peaceful day-to-day, just waiting to be disturbed by a me. One of the words used to describe Red Dead the most is alive, ironically. This is because they put great focus on populating the world with NPCs. And of course, the bad guys make up some of these NPCs. Some movies and games try to give you a good reason to kill loads of bad guys, whether it's differing morals or just them being straight up Nazis. Most games and films don't want you to feel bad for the bad guys. Now, the morally dirty, rotten, and filthy members of the Old West society are great targets. Just big bullies who are trying to make a quick buck or harass the little guy. A good example of this is in Magnificent Seven, a generally poorly received movie but with a great villain. A corrupt businessman named Bartholomew Bogue who throws money at all his problems and obstacles, and who hires loads of lowlife and yellow-bellied scum to keep the innocent civilians in check. All of these elements coming together can make for a great Western experience, interactive or not. One major flaw in modern Western games I've noticed in experiences like Evil West is they try to over-stylize the West. Sometimes it can be a cute niche, but to me it comes off as brash and too cartoony, where all your weapons are steampunk contraptions in a fantasy or sci-fi setting that just so happens to be in the time of the outlaws. One of the things that makes the Old West so appealing is the simplicity of it all. There is no access to modern vehicles, weapons, and communication. So when I play something like Guns and Stories VR, and I'm given a heavy machine gun with an automatic loading grenade launcher, I don't feel like a cowboy at all. I feel like I'm a space marine. This is something I've always wanted to talk about, which I like to call overaction. During the 60s and 70s, Westerns were the peak of action. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Butch Cassidy, True Grit. But once we got to the 80s, we got into more modern warfare. Predator, Rambo 2, Terminator 2. And the main things these movies have in common is their focus on getting the biggest and beefiest men with the biggest and loudest guns. Then we move to the 2000s and 2010s, and it starts to be more about the person, not the weapon. Jason Bourne, Taken, John Wick. This is more traditional in the sense that the skill of the individual is what's being focused on, not the amount of destruction they can cause. I believe this is the route we would want to go with Old West content, not the pseudo sci-fi fantasy over-the-top stylized stuff we've been getting saturated with. Now, how could we apply this to an actual game? Transferring Red Dead to VR may not be as easy as plopping a headset on Arthur Morgan's face, but there are several mechanics that could easily be transferred over to our hypothetical Western experience. The NPCs, the wide array of reasonable yet satisfying weapons, the grounded in reality setting, and all the little details therein. I also want to take aspects of already existing VR games. For example, Hot Dogs, Horseshoes, and Hand Grenades has this little worst world area, and I love looking at all the Old West weapons. It's like a little puzzle trying to figure out how to load each one for the first time. But as I play more and more, it gets easier and faster. I want you to imagine for me a completely unscripted segment where you physically push the swinging doors of the saloon. The whole building is full of music, people playing a game of Texas Hold'em to your right, then going to the bar and ordering a glass of whiskey that I can legally drink. I'm old enough to legally drink. Then the bartender physically slides the glass over to your hand and you have to physically catch it and then physically pour it into your own whiskey glass physically. I think that would be so cool. Now, the main thing that I was thinking of, but I couldn't exactly figure out, was traversal. How would you get around? Because I find walking around for long periods of time in VR to be a bit of an irritating task. So, a horse of course. Got a really loud text message. And in this hypothetical, you could even physically grab the tassels on the horse and control the horse that way. Go faster. Get bruised. I'm hitting you. I feel like the core tenets of this hypothetical game would be the NPCs, gunplay, physics, and traversal. Good, generally intelligent NPCs to liven up the world, complex yet engaging gunplay to match the era, good physics to fill in the gaps and keep every area of the world interesting and engaging, and enjoyable traversal to make sure you're not bored out of your mind when you're getting around the open world. This is the ultimate fantasy, the one thing that will make me feel truly complete. Oh, sorry, I think I'm confusing it with the power and love of Jesus Christ, my God. But it is still a cool thought. Maybe one day this dream will become a reality, but for now, it stays a dream, and we're left with this nightmare. Hello?
How's it going?
Good. I finished the recording, but I want you to do my outro for me, because I didn't do one.
Okay. So Red Dead, huh? That's a pretty good game, right? But what if, now hear me out, there were two of them? And now in this video, Brandon has already discussed about the quality of...
I'm back.
Oh, hi. Alright guys, thanks so much for watching. You are merely a conscript in my master plan of world domination. You have no power to... Also, join the Discord to become a mindless hive member of my growing ant farm.
Also subscribe to BananaGalazy, TheUnchangingJimmy, and IntrepidandBold as well.
Yeah! Subscribe to the second channel, Who Knows What, just so you can really solidify that you will in fact be giving me your firstborn. Thank you so much. Bye.
Yo, I'm about to sing.
Hey, my drip is wider than Cabino. I drink that Roxagino. Oh wait, wrong series, that's Bobby though. Me and Psycho Trooper really teach bro, and that ain't all the D-Lo. Zero, that's over on people.
Try to cross me and Psycho, that's your last mistake. First was me and Rebel Scum, but that one tastes like cake.